A letter by John Winthrop. The leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony were members of the landed gentry, wealthy merchants, and university graduates. All of these things, of course, are reflected in their English. The first governor of the colony was John Winthrop, a lawyer and lord of the manor in Suffolk, England. In the following letter to his wife, Margaret, he describes his life in America and tells her what to pack when she comes to join him. He uses the second-person singular pronouns, thee and thou, to address his wife. The Quakers and Puritans believed that these forms should be used solely on the basis of number. To use them for familiar and polite address was to them seen as a denial of equality. My dear wife, I wrote today by my brother Arthur, but I durst write no more. Then I need not care, though it miscarried, for I found him the old man still. Yet I would have kept him to ease my brother, but that his own desire to return, and the scarcity of provisions here, yielded the stronger reason to let him go. Now, my good wife, let us join in praising our merciful God, that, howsoever he hath afflicted us, both generally and particularly mine own family in his stroke upon my son Henry, yet myself and the rest of our children and family are safe and in health, and that he upholds our hearts, that we faint not in all our troubles, but can yet wait for a good issue. And howsoever our fare be but coarse in respect of what we formerly had, pease, puddings, and fish being our ordinary diet, yet he makes it sweet and wholesome to us, that I may truly say, I desire no better. Besides in this, that he begins with us thus in affliction, it is the greater argument to us of his love, and of the goodness of the work which we are about. For Satan bends his forces against us, and stirs up his instruments to all kind of mischief, so that I think here are some persons who never showed so much wickedness in England as they have done here. Therefore, be not discouraged, my dear wife, by anything thou shalt hear from hence, for I see no cause to repent of our coming hither, and thou seest by our experience that God could bring safe hither even the tenderest women and the youngest children, as he did many in divers ships, though the voyage were more tedious than formerly hath been known in this season. Be sure to be warm clothed, and to have store of fresh provisions, meal, eggs put up in salt or ground malt, butter, oatmeal, peas, and fruits, and a large strong chest or two, well locked, to keep these provisions in. And be sure they be bestowed in the ship where they may be readily come by, which the boatswain will see to, and the quartermasters, if they be rewarded beforehand. But for these things my son will take care. Be sure to have ready at sea 2 or 3 skillets of several sizes, a large frying pan, a small stewing pan, and a case to boil a pudding in. Store of linen for use at sea, and sack to bestow among the sailors. Some drinking vessels, and pewter, and other vessels. And for physic, you shall need no other but a pound of Dr. Wright's Electuarium Lenitivum, and his direction to use it. A gallon of scilly grass to drink a little, 5 or 6 mornings together, with some saltpetre dissolved in it, and a little grated or sliced nutmeg. Jonathan Edwards, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. The tradition of lively preaching, which we heard something of before, was continued in America and brought to new heights, indeed, during an 18th century religious movement known as the Great Awakening. Jonathan Edwards, an American-born Yale graduate, was one of the most famous preachers of that movement. His fiery rhetoric and vivid biblical imagery are illustrated in Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, in which we can hear echoes of the King James Bible, probably the most important influence on his style, but also of 18th century prescriptive grammars. When he was 16 years old or so, Jonathan Edwards would set down a number of rules for writing on the cover of his notes on natural science. One of these was to follow the recommendations of the Ladies' Library, a work by Mary Ray, granddaughter of Jeremy Taylor, that contained the precepts adopted by most 18th century grammarians. The use of this awful subject may be for awakening unconverted persons in this congregation. This that you have heard is the case of every one of you that are out of Christ. That world of misery, that lake of burning brimstone, is extended abroad under you. There is the dreadful pit of the glowing flames of the wrath of God. There is hell's wide gaping mouth open, and you have nothing to stand upon, nor anything to take hold of. There is nothing between you and hell but the air. It is only the power and mere pleasure of God that holds you up. You probably are not sensible of this. You find you are kept out of hell, but do not see the hand of God in it. But look at other things, as the good state of your bodily constitution, your care of your own life, and the means you use for your own preservation. But indeed, these things are nothing. If God should withdraw his hand, they would avail no more to keep you from falling than the thin air to hold up a person that is suspended in it. Your wickedness makes you, as it were, heavy as lead, and to tend downwards with great weight and pressure towards hell. And if God should let you go, you would immediately sink and swiftly descend and plunge into the bottomless gulf, and your healthy constitution, and your own care and prudence, and best contrivance, and all your righteousness would have no more influence to uphold you and keep you out of hell than a spider's web would have to stop a fallen rock. Were it not for the sovereign pleasure of God, the earth would not bear you one moment, for you are a burden to it. The creation groans with you. The creature is made subject to the bondage of your corruption, not willingly. The sun does not willingly shine upon you to give you light to serve sin and Satan. The earth does not willingly yield her increase to satisfy your lusts, nor is it willingly a stage for your wickedness to be acted upon. The air does not willingly serve you for breath to maintain the flame of life in your vitals, while you spend your life in the service of God's enemies. God's creatures are good, and were made for men to serve God with, and do not willingly subserve to any other purpose, and groan when they are abused to purposes so directly contrary to their nature and end. And the world would spew you out, were it not for the sovereign hand of him who hath subjected it in hope. There are black clouds of God's wrath now hanging directly over your heads, full of the dreadful storm, and big with thunder. And were it not for the restraining hand of God, it would immediately burst forth upon you. The sovereign pleasure of God, for the present, stays his rough wind. Otherwise it would come with fury, and your destruction would come like a whirlwind, and you would be like the chaff of the summer threshing floor. Amos Farnsworth's Journal. The language of less famous Americans survives in journals and diaries, like that of Amos Farnsworth, who was a 20-year-old son of a Groton, Massachusetts farmer, and who joined a company of Minutemen and kept a diary during the Revolutionary War. In a colorful, colloquial style and semi-literate spelling, he describes the life of an 18th century New England soldier. Significant features of Farnsworth's dialect include the use of a short I in words like regiment, friends, and so on, a pronunciation of Tuesday instead of Tuesday, and a number of other typical New England pronunciations. You will hear especially the habit of dropping an R in words like horses and marsh, which come out as horses and mash. Wednesday morning, April 19, 1775. Was alarmed with the news of the regulars firing at our men at Concord. Marched and came there where some had been killed. Pulled on and came to Lexington, where much hurt was done to the houses there by breaking glass and burning many houses. But they was forced to retreat, though they was more numerous than we. And I saw many dead regulars by the way. Went into a house where blood was half over shoes. Thursday, April 20. Came to Cambridge in the forenoon. There was some men wanted to go to Charleston. I went for one and viewed the regulars and found they was entrenching on Charleston Hill. Friday, April 21. Nothing material happened in the forenoon. About sunset, marched with the regiment in company with Colonel Leonard's regiment to Roxbury. Saturday, April 22. Kept in motion, moved from that house that we was in to another. This night was alarmed by the regulars firing at our guard on the neck. Turned out and marched towards them, but nothing more ensued. Soon turned into our barracks and slept quiet. Sunday, April 23rd. Lay still in the forenoon. In the afternoon, the regiment to the meeting house, and heard a fine sermon from Timothy 2:3. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Monday, April 24. In the forenoon, I went round on the marsh below our guards, within about 60 rods of the regulars. This night the regulars fired at our guard, but there was no alarm. Tuesday, April 25. Lay still in the forenoon. In the afternoon we went up to the general's and received orders and marched to Cambridge again. Oh, the goodness of God in preserving my life from danger. April 26, 27, 28, and 29 days. Was a struggling with the officers which should be the highest in office. Finally Farwell got orders to list, and listed some, and then joined with Chaunge and Company and made out a company. I myself listed with the rest. Saturday, May the 27th. Went on Hog Island and brought off 6 horses, 27 horned cattle, and 411 sheep. About the middle of the afternoon went from Hog Island to Noddle's Island, and sought one house and barn on fire, killed some horses and cattle, brought off 2 or 3 cows, and 1 horse. I with 5 men got off the horse, and before we got from Noddle's Island to Hog Island, we was fired upon by a privateer schooner. But we crossed the river, and about 15 of us squatted down in a ditch on the marsh and stood our ground. And there came a company of regulars on the marsh, on the other side of the river and the schooner, and we had a hot fire until the regulars retreated. But notwithstanding the bullets flew very thick, yet there was not a man of us killed. Surely God has a favour toward us, and he can save in one place as well as another. We left the island about sunset and came to Chelsea. And on Saturday about 10 at night marched to Winnimisset Ferry, where there was a schooner and sloop a-firing with great fury on us there. But thanks be unto God that gave us the victory at this time, for through his providence the schooner that played upon us the day before run aground, and we sought fire to her, and consumed her there, and the sloop received much damage. In this engagement we had not a man killed, but 4 wounded, but we hope all will recover. One of the 4 was a Townsend man belonging to our company. The bullet went through his mouth from one cheek to the other. Thanks be unto God that so little hurt was done us, when the ball sung like bees round our heads. Thomas Jefferson's Essay Towards Facilitating Instruction in the Anglo-Saxon. Thomas Jefferson was strongly interested in furthering the education of American youth. He believed that this education should of course include the study of Old English. As a law student, he had found it necessary to refer to the language for the explanation of many legal terms, and his own study convinced him that a knowledge of Old English results in a greater appreciation and understanding of the English language as a whole. In the following selection, he sets forth a plan for normalizing texts and making them easier to read. Just as King Alfred had translated Latin works into Anglo-Saxon for the benefit of the youth of his day, so Jefferson translated and normalized Anglo-Saxon texts for the benefit of American students. And we shall end with Jefferson's transcription of a biblical text in Old English. The importance of the Anglo-Saxon dialect toward a perfect understanding of the English language seems not to have been duly estimated by those charged with the education of youth, and yet it is unquestionably the basis of our present tongue. It was a full-formed language. Its frame and construction, its declension of nouns and verbs, and its syntax were peculiar to the northern languages and fundamentally different from those of the south. It was the language of all England, properly so called, from the Saxon possession of that country in the 6th century to the time of Henry III in the 13th, and was spoken pure and unmixed with any other. Although the Romans had been in possession of that country for nearly 5 centuries from the time of Julius Caesar, yet it was a military possession chiefly, by their soldiery alone, and with dispositions intermutually jealous and unamicable. They seem to have aimed at no lasting settlements there, and to have had little familiar mixture with the native Britons. In this state of connection, there would probably be little incorporation of the Roman into the native language, and on their subsequent evacuation of the island, its traces would soon be lost altogether. And had it been otherwise, these innovations would have been carried with the natives themselves when driven into Wales by the invasion and entire occupation of the rest of the southern portion of the island by the Anglo-Saxons. The dissimilitude between Saxon and English is more in appearance than in reality. It consists chiefly in the difference of character and orthography. Suppress that, represent the sounds by the English character and orthography, and it is immediately seen to be not a different language, but the same in an earlier stage of its progression. And such editions of the Saxon writers, by removing the obstructions of character and false spelling, enabling us to give habitual and true instead of uncouth and false sounds to words, would promote the study of the English language by facilitating its examination in its mother state and making us sensible of delicacies and beauties in it, unfelt but by the few who have had the courage, through piles of rubbish, to seek a radical acquaintance with it. A specimen of the form in which the Anglo-Saxon writings still extant might be advantageously published for facilitating to the English student the knowledge of the Anglo-Saxon dialect. Genesis, chapter 1. On yene yeshop God heaven and earth on. In beginning shaped God heaven and earth. So earthe sothliche was idle and empty, and thestru weren over thera nieuwelnisse bradnisse, and God's gast was jeferred over wateru. The earth, forsooth, was idle and empty, and darkness were over the abyss's broadness, and God's ghost was fared over water. God quath je werth a lecht, and lecht werth je worcht. God quoth then, were light, and light were wrought. God ye saw that it good was, and he todeelde that lecht from them theestrum. God saw then that it good was, and he dealed that light from the darkness.